Hello my friend, how are you? It is Pat Sloan here for my daily video, and today is Thursday, and on our calendar for the month, I've got the Today's Button Club project, but it's not. No, I moved it to Monday, so there you go. It'll be on Monday. So today I'm going to do some Q&A. We had some great questions asked over on the Facebook group, Quilt Along with Pat Sloan, and so I'll get to those. But first let's talk about the jelly roll quilt, because I think every day I'm going to be talking about the jelly roll quilt because it's got to move it forward, and it's fun, and a lot of you have just sort of zoomed right through and done the whole thing, because once you get going on something like this, it's easy to just complete it, and I decided that I would move it forward so that I could get all the blocks sewn. So first let's take a look. Okay, so it is the free pattern at the Fat Quarter Shop called Ripples, and this is what it looks like. Let's see, let me get a pan up here. I'm going to walk on over there, because when I'm looking at it here, I'm trying to decide, do I want to switch around a few of the blocks? Because I'm looking at color, I'm looking to see what might be a little like jammed up in one color. There's a lot of light background pieces in Morrison Park. This is all my jelly roll from Morrison Park. And then there's ones that read darker. And so I want to sprinkle those around so I don't lump things like this dark ones, like in a pile. But what I noticed here is I have 4 of them that read a little bit more solid, and over here I have 3 that read a little bit more light. And so what I'm going to do is switch. So I'm going to take this pink block and switch it with one of these, and I want to switch it with this one because that's balanced. It's in the middle of those 3. But the thing is, let me just pull that up just a little bit more. There we go. The thing is the prints. I want to have, like this print and this print are the same. And so I want to instead take this one here. So I'm going to switch the paisley to here. And then I will switch this one down here. And then I will switch this one, this one up here. So that is one change. The problem too is, like you find, right, is if you're trying to balance your colors around, you move a couple things and all of a sudden the rest of it gets a bit out of whack. And so I try to only move a little bit at a time and then let it sit. One of the things I did is there was 2 jelly rolls with the yellow. So there's 2 yellow blocks that have in opposite corners. There was, the greens are sprinkled around, then there's sort of pink, red, and the blues. And then trying to get those lights, these are what I call lights, the light background ones, so that they're sort of sprinkled around. Like these 2 now, oops, I'm stuck over there. These 2 could be switched. So I could go like this, I think, and then like that. There we go. So now it's a little bit, I think that might help. So I'm going to leave that sit. And if I like some of the, like it in the next day or so, I will start moving everything around. Well, I'm sorry, not start moving around. I will stop moving them around, and I will sew the rows. Now, one of our friends put little mini sashing between it. I saw it on Facebook. I didn't save the picture, but she put little mini, it looked like maybe 1-inch sashing or even 1/2-inch sashing. It was just a little separator. That was kind of cute, but I decided that I don't want to add more to it. I will add a border on this, maybe the stripe. That's what I'm thinking, is the stripe as a border all the way around it. So the pattern does give you the option, suggests a border, and I think the stripe that I'm using in the middle of them would be very effective. And then I can bind it in. I like darker bindings usually, so I'll bind it in one of the darker, either the red or the navy. All right, so I wanted to also clarify, I had a couple people ask me questions from yesterday's video. Somebody thought that I only started doing videos in March. Now I may misread their comment, but I have been doing videos for 13 years. If you look at this little place on YouTube, you can go and drop down and sort by most recent And if you flip that, it's the oldest, and you can see 13 years ago I was doing my first videos here on YouTube. And the other thing I wanted to clarify is I don't have just 10 tops that, you know, I have more tops. There's just 10 tops from 2020 that didn't get quilted. So yes, I have more tops. I have a count of them. There's quite large, but I haven't done one recently because occasionally, like when I did the, gave quilts to be done for the charity, for the fire charity drive, I gave tops to be quilted. So that was like 4 of my tops went out to do that. So, you know, so I do have a lot more tops. I just don't have a count on those. There was maybe at one point there were 30, 800, something like that. And if you go over to my gallery, you can see what I've done this year, because I'm pretty accurate. It's either going to be 31 or 32 projects, and like I lumped making pillows for Christmas into one and the Halloween ones into one, even though there's like 3 pillows. I just put them as one item. So that's quite a bit for 1 year. Quite a bit. So let's do a little Q&A. Let's see. Then I'll tell you a little bit about, basically remind you about what's coming up. So Q&A. Sandra asks, I've got them listed here. Have you ever done more machine quilting after your quilt has the binding on it? Yes. Once my quilt has the binding on it, I can go back in and do more machine quilting. What you might find is that after you finish it all and maybe you have it hanging up or you do a photograph and all of a sudden you realize like, hey, there's a section there that could use more quilting, or this part would get better definition if I added a little bit more quilting to it. Or you might just look at the overall thing and say, hey, you know what, I'd just like to put some more quilting in this. It's not quite, it's a little light on the quilting. So you most definitely can go back. The thing with machine quilting, and this would be the same for hand quilting, is that you don't want one area really dense and then one area lightly quilted, because it will warp a bit the quilt. It won't stay square if you have got one that's tighter and the one that's loose. So you need to have them all quilted about the same density. So that's where sometimes you might find a spot where it's like, oh, I just either missed it or I didn't get back there and do as much as I meant to do. So yes, you can go back and add more. On an addendum to that, which I find very interesting, is there are people who will actually put their binding on the quilt before they do their quilting. I have a friend, my friend Lena does that quite regularly. I think a lot of times she's doing it with her hand quilted pieces, but I believe she also does it when she machine quilts. So there are many ways to accomplish things. There are very few such hard and fast rules that you can't do something different and get the same end result. So always be open to ideas, because something might work better for you than something else. All right. So Monica says she has not, she's had her sewing machine oil, you know, the oil that comes from your sewing machine. She goes, since the fall of Rome. She's had her sewing machine oil since the fall of Rome. Do you think the oil might be bad? It's like, yes, I do. Oil is going to get thickened and get a bit gunky after a while. I don't think oil is meant to be kept for eternity. So just go buy some new oil. It's not expensive. Okay. So Tracy wants to know, what is my favorite Christmas tradition? And I think that's a lovely question. And I had to really think about it, because I'm not a huge traditions person. But in my family, which I didn't do this year, but most of the time I will decorate the day after, decorate my Christmas tree, decorate my living room, decorate the house the day after Thanksgiving. And it's something that we always did. And so I consider that my tradition. But it isn't a hard and fast. I have decorated prior, when maybe we were out of town one time for a lot of December, so I decorated before we left so that I got to enjoy it some, and it was there when we came back. And then this year it was just, I needed something cheerful, so I decorated just a few days before Thanksgiving. wasn't that much in advance. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to do this last one from CA. CA says, how do you prepare your flimsy, your quilt top for the long armor? And this is the question I think is most interesting here. She wanted to know, how do you know that it's good enough for the long armor to do? I found that question interesting. I had to think about it a second because I am hiring somebody to do my work, and I never ever considered, would they not think my work was good enough? They're hired to do a job, so it just never occurred to me that my work would not be acceptable. And I think most long armors are not thinking that way. They know that there's all different skill levels. Everybody's coming to them with different skill levels, and so the fact that you might be a newer quilter, they know that, so they will, if you tell them, they'll know that. Sometimes they can just tell by your workmanship, because you might not be quite the same as somebody who's been quilting 35 years. But they're still going to do the job. They are pros. They know how to handle a quilt. But your job is to have your quilt ready. Two things that are most important. Well, a couple things. A couple things that are most important is be sure all your seams are good. Like, tug at your quilt a little bit. Did you get a seam allowance that was too skinny and all of a sudden you pop it open? The long arm machine is going to pull your quilt really, really tight, depending on how they load it. And so it'll pop open any seam that you just did not catch very well. Other thing is flip it to the back. I'll put a picture here. And look for long threads and clip those off, because particularly if it's a dark thread against a light fabric, you will see it in the front. Plus, those things they look messy. They're messy to see threads through your fabric, even if you can see any color, usually. And then the other thing you want to be sure, and there's more, you can look at any long armor site, they probably have tips, but you want to make sure your backing is big enough, because it needs to be wrapped around the rollers. There's these big rollers, and your backing has to go around those. So you can't send your backing only an inch on each side. It won't go under the rollers. I usually send like 3 to 5 inches of width on all sides. So that can be 6 to 10 inches bigger than my top. All right, all those techie things. So coming up to remind you, we've got the Home Is our next block Wednesday, which will be starting the first Wednesday in January. Then also I am working, which is why I can't do like bindings and all that stuff. I can't just sit and do that all day long, because I'm designing, and I'll be writing the directions and everything for the Home Is. Between now and then, I also am working on the Aurifil Designer of the Month layout and getting that quilt top made. I also have a few other projects that will be announced in January, but I need to do work on them in December. And so once again, I have 14 or less days to do all of those things. So I'm still sort of categorizing what I can get done and looking at doing some bindings over the next few days, or the next few days every evening, which is when I do that kind of stuff. I will have a binding, get it ready, start putting it on the quilt. If I'm not finished, I didn't get it all the way on the quilt, finish it up the next day, get another binding done. See if I can get 3 or 4 or more bindings done. At least 4, at least those 4 I talked about yesterday. All right, my friend. I've got all the links below, and I'm trying to remember to put a pinned comment. So for those of you who have trouble seeing opening the description, look for the pinned comment. It should be the first comment that you see, should be mine, and I will have some links in there, some of the most important things. So I love you. See you online.